Hello everybody, thank you for waiting. We are so sorry for the delay, but we are now up and running again. So hi everyone. I like it, at least there's still like the enthusiasm. I see y'all cleared out the whole pizza tray at the back, so I hope it was good. For those of you who didn't get pizzas, please be a little bit earlier next time. But then earlier also must wait a while because of the rain hall. Okay, paise for that. Anyways, welcome to another Founders Meetup by Tech in Asia. We hope you guys will learn a lot from this one. Tech in Asia Singapore conference is coming up in May. It's the 17th and 18th of May. Use this code over here for a special 30% discount. That is 5% more than the discounts out there right now. So don't say never share with you all. Oh wait, take the okay. Okay. Are we good? Oh, do I need to post some more? Okay. Okay. All right. There is a Tech in Asia community Facebook group for cool people. So for you guys, please join the group. There's awesome discussions happening there, awesome sharings from community members. Everyone's there, from investors to founders. And it's a huge sharing of everything, really. So this is the place to go if you're on the interwebs. Next up, next month's Founders Meetup, we will have product discovery. Now this is for product managers or founders that are looking to build their product. This is to build and validate in real time. So this will be held on the 21st March. Do look out for the invites that will be sent out really, really soon. Not only that, we have our city chapter initiative, which we will be going to Hong Kong and Kuala Lumpur. That will see that in this month and the next. We have office hours and speed dating sessions. Speed dating being that you can actually pitch to investors, and office hours is more of like a one-to-one mentorship kind of thing. So if you have friends in these countries, please let them know. We also have founders meetups in this country as well. Founders Meetup in Hong Kong is Content Strategies for Startups by Lilian Leong. She's the COO of 9gag. And for Kuala Lumpur on the 10th March, we have Startup Culture by Alan Chia from Gokar. Right now, I'm going to hand the time for a while to our venue partners, SG Innovate, to say a few words.
All right. So thanks so much everyone for coming. Over here at SG Innovate, we are always happy to support startup events like this. And for SG Innovate, what we believe in is that Singapore has all the necessary resources, the talents to build startups that can grow into globally relevant companies. So if any of you is working on a startup, would like to work on a startup, we'll be more than happy to work with you to change the world together. Thanks.
All right, now it's the moment you guys have been waiting for very patiently, and I thank you guys for that. Let's put our hands together to welcome Nina Geometrieva, the product designer at Google. All right, come on.
Hi guys, actually it's my third day at Google and most of my career I've been in startups. So yeah, I guess I'm qualified for this talk, I hope. So okay, I'm Nina. I came to Singapore some 3 years ago. I joined Zendesk at the time, and I've worked in Grab and Paktor from the local companies that you guys might know. So I'm a Noogler now, and it's pretty exciting. But then I've worked with all kinds of startups, from like 1-person startup to a 2,000 people startup. And today, actually, what I wanted to talk about is just to help founders to kind of understand design, how they can use design to lift them up and to basically get started and to gain a competitive edge. I know usually founders have a lot of questions, especially the founders who don't have a design background. They have a lot of questions around, so do I need design? When do I need design? Why? What type of designer do I look for? Freelance or full-time? So many questions, right? So I think, yeah, I wanted to compile a little bit of background, how designers think about it, what you might find useful, and hopefully some of this will help you with your current startup. Okay. So, oh, by the way, since I was very busy starting to work at Google, I'm gonna wing it today, kind of. So I have a little bit of yeah, I have a few slides ready, but then I hope you guys ask a lot of questions. If not, I'll improvise and guess what you want to know. So please feel free to interrupt and ask me anything. Okay, so I'm talking about design, but then design has a lot of disciplines, many fields within design. Obviously, I won't be talking about fashion design or industrial design because I don't know much about that. I mean, there are some principles which are shared, but then I assume that most of you guys are interested in the software design disciplines. So I'll be talking about UI and UX and visual design, illustration, and all of that you need to create a software startup. So I'll start with the basics of what is design, and I'll keep it very practical. I'm planning to keep it really like practical, something that you can use tomorrow. Not like where does the word design come from? I don't think we care about that. So design is pretty much what it looks like and how it works. So I think these two parts are quite important because very often people think that design is only about what it looks like, and that's wrong. So it's not something like the cherry that you put on the top. It's much more than that. There's depth, and a great designer can actually help you to define your product, to understand your product, to find your audience. So there's a heavy overlap between design and business and even some stuff that you would find in product management as well. Okay, so what it looks like. Usually visual design disciplines would be dealing with this part of design, what it looks like. And here you have a lot of job titles like okay, visual designer, obviously, illustrators, graphic designers, brand designers, UI designers, and so on. And all of these are basically different ways. Okay, you're taking a picture. All of these are basically different ways to tackle how something looks like visually. And this is quite important. I mean, we all know that brand is a very strong tool. It's something that gives your audience this like it's a magnet, right? And loyalty is very tied to a brand. So if it's organic, you basically don't have to spend too much on marketing to gain new customers. We all know that Apple is a brand that's well, most people I guess recognize as a brand that's loved, that the people adore. It's a brand that we all want to, in the startups that we create, we all want to sort of. Thank you. We all want to achieve that loyalty. And it's hard. I mean, it's not something that you can just simply create a loyalty program and you're done. You need to be a brand that's consistently delivering value. And obviously, this is not only something that designers deal with, but purely from the visual part, how it looks like, and actually using a lot of psychology, a lot of approaches about how people perceive, I don't know, certain visual styles, color, and so on, to create certain associations. So it's a very, very, very strong tool. And how it works is related to UX. I guess you guys have heard of user experience design. So interaction designers, product designers, UX designers, and I added user researchers and information architects and so on here, which is quite related. There's a heavy overlap between the terms, and actually even in the design scene, many people can't agree what's the difference between an interaction designer, product designer, and UX designer. So, but the essence of it is that the logic, the flow, what users go through when they use your product, what's the mechanism of how your product works, that's basically the topics that these designers deal with. So I'm breaking it down into two core skills that any great designer would have. And more often than not, the raw talent, what I call raw talent, is to be just great at design, to have a perfect design sense, to be able to create something that wouldn't require explanation. People would just love it. You're great with color, great with shape. It's a visual piece that people would share and talk about. So that means you have raw talent, and this is very often found in visual designers. You have also like animators and motion designers and so on, which is quite related. And then on the other hand, you have designers who are great at evaluating people, at understanding problems, at communicating it, and they have a great business sense. So these people are usually a great fit to be interaction designers. And there's, of course, a lot in the middle. There's people who are great at both, great at none. I come from a visual design background, so I guess I owe most of my career to visual design. But then I'm kind of moving this way. So I'm learning a lot about interaction design, so I can be like a full end-to-end product designer that can deal with both interaction and visual design. But yeah, if I'm hiring someone, I would try to find either one of these skills, and if I do, then I think this person is worth giving a chance. Okay, so design in startups. I guess it really depends. I mean, it's hard to have one rule that works for everything. But I think in order to decide what you need for your startup, it's important to look at the industry overall. So is it something that heavily relies on design? If it's, for example, if you're selling shampoo and you need a great brand, and then obviously visual design is pretty much at the top of your priorities, because that's the only cue that people use in order to decide whether to buy your product or not. If you're dealing with software, on the other hand, of course, depends on the complexity, industry, and so on. But then you might want to prioritize looking for an interaction designer. So I wanted to get a little bit deeper into what you might actually need, and so you know who you want to hire. Okay, so yeah, I wanted to have some examples here. I mean, you would need both at certain period at certain time. You would need both visual and interaction designers. But I know that in startups, you have to make tough choices. You have to choose one or the other. You can't always hire the best. And usually, startup founders try to find what happened? Okay, I clicked something. Back. So don't look for unicorns. I mean, you wouldn't find a unicorn. You would most likely find someone who knows how to do both, but not very well. So I guess I would try to hire freelancers as much as possible until you know what you need, until you have a heavy influx of projects that a designer could start working on. I mean, this is very general advice, but if you're thinking about hiring and whether I need to hire full-time or freelance and who do I hire, I think that would make sense. But actually, I wanted to cover that about the difference between visual and interaction and what value they would bring in your product. So visual, I would go with visual if your product is very dependent on brand, is very dependent on appearance, and if you want to invest in brand, if you think that would give you that competitive edge, then it would make sense to prioritize your brand, to build an amazing logo, an amazing brand, a whole brand identity that's very consistent, that has a consistent message, and the voice and tone, hire a copywriter, whatever it takes to make it look very professional and just the way you like it. Interaction, for hiring an interaction designer, you would need to prioritize investing in your product. So if you have an e-commerce site or something like that, a brand won't really help you much unless you have a product that people want to use. They know why they want it, and it's actually different, very well thought out. It's way too complex to rely on brand. So yeah, if your competitive advantage is how your product works, then definitely go for an interaction designer. And yeah, you can work on your brand. You can hire someone part-time, or just hire a freelancer to design you a logo, or worst case scenario, I can't believe I'm saying this, but you can actually use a tool to design a logo or something like that. I mean, I'm a brand designer. I shouldn't be telling you this. But yeah, it's a nice, quick and cheap way to just get started. Okay, so the part about freelance or full-time, I pretty much covered this. But I think until you find out what you need, and that's the most important part really, don't jump straight into just hiring someone full-time. I would work freelance. I mean, most of my career, is it most of my career? Actually, okay, certain part of my career, I've been working freelance, like surviving on freelance pretty much for a couple of years. And yeah, I mean, I was working with a lot of startups from all around the world with different teams, collaborating with different ideas. So it's really interesting to find out how they work, and most of them actually had no idea what I was doing and how I was working. And I realized that yeah, most startup founders, unless they're coming from a design background, they don't know much. They don't know what to expect from a designer. They don't know how a designer works, and that's okay. That's okay. That's why the designer is here. But then I found myself kind of trying to educate my clients back then, and I think on the other side of things, it would be useful for you to just work with anyone, but no strings attached, until you find out what you really need and go and find that person. Okay, so freelancers, if you have a one-time project, like one-time design for something that, I don't know, that wouldn't require constant maintenance or working on new stuff all the time. If you need a brand, obviously you would need someone to do it once, and then maybe next time in a couple of years, if it's a really well-developed brand, then yeah, go with a freelancer. And if the product is very, very simple, and as I said previously, the differentiation is mostly in the visual appearance, yeah, then it would make sense to hire freelance. And yeah, as well, like if you're early stage, as I mentioned, I would recommend mostly to go with freelance. Full-timers, if you notice an ongoing influx of things, of tasks that need to be handled by a designer, if you don't know where your product is going, and if you're confused about which feature to build and what brings value to your users, and you feel like you're out of touch with your users, and you want to get a user researcher or something, then I think thinking about full-timer would make more sense, because these things are long-term. You won't get results in your first week or two. You need someone who would invest themselves, who would get to know you, your team, how you work your product really well. Because one thing I noticed when I was working freelance is that I never got to know the product really well. Like, I don't get in depth. I only get to know the surface of it mostly, and the part I'm hired to do, but then I don't get that big picture understanding. So if you need someone to do really like complex stuff on the UX side especially, then I would consider hiring a full-timer. And yeah, of course, later stage you definitely need one. Okay, so design thinking. I think design thinking is not really something that's only reserved for designers. It's a framework for solving problems, and it's definitely useful for anyone to know, especially people who are interested in business, or you're on the product side of things, you're a product manager. Having the knowledge of how designers approach problems will definitely bring value to how you work. And yeah, actually, I think there's quite a significant amount of books written on different variations of design thinking, many of which are adapted to product management or so on. So I'm just gonna briefly go through the process. So I'm not dedicating like a whole bunch of time on this, even though this was kind of the topic. But yeah, I wanted to give you more like a general, you know, palette of things, so you guys can go in depth, like read a book, Google it, but then I'm giving you like the basics. Okay, so the process, design thinking is, yeah, as I said, a way of solving problems. And why it exists in the first place? It's because designers approach problems in many different ways, and some ways are more successful than others. So I guess this is more of a way to standardize that thinking, that mindset, and to ensure that you get constantly great results. So of course you'll miss, sometimes you will miss an important segment of your audience, you will miss an important fact about your product, you won't judge something, I don't know, you won't prioritize something very well. But design thinking will help you to get the best result with what you have, basically. So first part would be to understand your audience, understand who you're designing for. You don't have to jump straight into designing. Just understand first. Talk to people, observe. If you have data, that's great, but if you're starting out, you probably have nothing. So just try to understand and talk to people. I mean, yeah, just study your competitors and the industry and whatever you can to understand. Anything is useful. The second stage is to define the problem. So what are you trying to solve? Like, before you start doing anything, it's important to know why and what is this thing that you're trying to solve in the first place. Like, is there a need to do something at all? Or are you just, I don't know, you feel like, oh, I'm doing something because that's expected of me. Because very often there is no problem and you're trying to solve something that doesn't exist. So I think defining the problem helps everyone, your team, be on the same page, and at the same time help you rethink whether this is the right problem or whether we have a problem in the first place. And okay, brainstorming. There are many ways to brainstorm, post-it, like probably I don't know, a lot of techniques that you can help people to get to know each other, relaxed, and feel free to fail and make mistakes and learn and so on, so that they can generate amazing ideas during the brainstorming stage. So after that's done, you go into prototyping stage. You create something as fast as possible. So like very agile. The more agile, the better. To do, and once you have some results, you can actually go back and do the same thing until you know you have something ready. MVP or whatever it is that you guys are doing, like whatever the stage. But this is something that works for one-man startup or for Google or anything in between. So while we're at Google, do you guys know Google Ventures? They actually they're dealing with many different startups, and they're helping them to they're helping them in many different ways. And one of the ways they're helping them is to get direction in their design. So they're using design thinking, like an adapted version of design thinking, to help them understand problems and overcome some obstacles. So working with many of the best startups in the world, they've developed the design sprint, which is basically design thinking in a 1 week period. So every day you get to do a different stage, and in 1 week you know whether this problem makes sense. You probably have some direction in terms of solution. and it gives you a lot of clarity. So the design sprint is something I recommend to startups like 100%, and we're doing it in bigger companies. It's also something that's common. It's not something like a process that you can apply for every single project, but if you have something where you need to define the problem, and it's suitable for bigger problems as well, where it's really hard to get clarity or understanding from the team, then the sprint is perfect. So I would recommend it. It's very easy reading. Like, it's short and it's more like a guide. It's not really a long book with long explanations and long stories. It has some useful examples, and I'm not promoting it because these guys work in the same company as me, because I was using it and reading it before I joined Google, so it's very useful. And I think that's it. Oh yeah, I wanted to give a recap of the process that's covered in the book. So yeah, Monday to Friday, and this is basically the design sprint that you go through. Monday, you're making a map. You're making a map of the basic flow that you want users to go through, and it's not flow like a design flow. It's very much more simple. It's something that doesn't require drawing skills, so it helps you to understand what your users are going through. And it's not even drawing skills, screens. It's more like just drawing a simple flow of what's going on. Tuesday is sketching. So this is where everyone is, like everyone including non-designers, is sketching a lot of ideas, and they're just generating a lot of stuff. And there's much more detail into this, so you guys can look it up. But sketching is really important because it's really fast. The medium is really fast, direct. You can show it to people, share it. You can put it up on a wall. People can just walk, around the office and look at it every time. So it's it works pretty well. And then decide on a direction, consolidate all the sketches, and then once you're done with that, you go into actual prototyping. So something that feels like a working product to users. And then the next day is test. So in 1 week, you know if this idea works or not. You're not spending a few months building something that might not work. So it's a great way to evaluate your ideas. Okay, so that's the design sprint, and I think, yeah, that's pretty much all I have. Do you guys have any questions for me? Early days as a designer. Okay, so to share about early days as a designer. So I was actually studying computer science, and I had a band, and I was the person who was designing the posters for our gigs, basically. And I somehow fell in love with that whole poster designing thing so much that I stopped going to university, stopped playing with my band. I locked myself up in my room for a few months and just generating posters all the time, until someone noticed my work and they asked me to join. So that was back in Macedonia, the country where I'm from, Eastern Europe. And after I got that job, I got a little bit of confidence that, oh, actually I can make money from this. And I started applying to companies that I love. And SoundCloud, not sure if you guys probably know SoundCloud. SoundCloud accepted my application, and I signed the contract to work with them and everything. But then my visa was denied because I didn't have university. So I didn't move to Germany to work for SoundCloud. I started freelancing. I got some opportunities for Vienna. I moved to Vienna for a while. Then I moved to Berlin, freelancing again. And that's when I came to Singapore. And yeah, so my early days were really graphic design oriented. like a lot of brand design, poster design, illustrations. Still, my most popular projects are illustrations. So people mostly know me as a visual designer, as an illustrator, because the UX work that I do is not something that can very clearly be, something very clearly understood by everyone. Art, everyone can appreciate art, but UX, it's not that easy to understand it. So, yeah, basically those were my early days as a visual designer.
Question?
Anything else?
Transitioning from a visual designer to an interaction designer, when did you make the switch? Are there any schools or classes you take, or is it something that you practice on your own? How do you make that switch from being a visual designer into an interaction designer?
So I knew very early on in my career that I wanted to move to UX. I felt like, yeah, I'm good at making posters and so on, but I'm really interested in the thinking part. I'm really interested in solving problems, and not only visual problems. So I was slowly finding ways to get into UX, and it was hard. I mean, I wasn't taking any classes or something. I was reading a lot of stuff, just analyzing apps, talking to people. And back in Macedonia, we didn't really have UX designers at the time, so I didn't have anyone to learn from. But when I moved to Singapore, I think that's when it really started happening, like going to meetups, connecting with people. And in the companies, when I was working as a visual designer, I would attend the UX meetings and try to learn some of the terms and what's going on. So yeah, it was very spontaneous transition. Yeah.
You spoke about long-term projects versus short-term projects in design. Could you give an example of how a long-term project would look like in case of design? And as a startup, as you go along the curve, how important is specializing in, say, subfields of design?
Right. So a long-term project would be to design an app, for example. Why? Because it's not only about designing it, but there's always something new to be done. So I had a really interesting question that came from actually a few different people. When I told them we had a 30 people design team in Grab, and everyone's like, why do you need 30 designers working on one app? Well, because the app is constantly evolving all the time. There's so much work, like 60 wouldn't be enough. Probably Uber has a few hundred people design team or something. So yeah, app would be one example. A poster, on the other hand, is something that's done once and for all. You don't need anyone to do anything about it after that. So it's pretty straightforward. And that's why usually the visual design work is more like one time, while the interaction work is more ongoing and long-term. This is a very raw generalization, but yeah, it's like a rule of thumb. Oh, sorry, you had another question about specialization? Right. So, I mean, there are many ways to divide the internal teams. Like you can divide by product, like in Google, or you can divide by metric. Like this is our growth team, this is our retention team. I don't know. So you have many ways to slice it. The same applies to design. But if you're talking specifically about the roles within design team, is it the roles or how you decide who to work on what? Okay. Yeah, well, it's not literally together. It's more like, okay, we have two designers working on this project, which is a self-contained feature. So there isn't a lot of interference. If there is interference, then it's like a bigger project with more designers. But usually designers would specialize in a certain part of the app. Like someone is working on, I don't know, loyalty, whatever, for passenger. Like, I literally just filled out my rolling grab because I can't think of anything else. But yeah, it's mostly according to the product or feature.
So, as an interactive designer, I know that you've probably faced a couple of challenges trying to validate the need for your position or role, especially in a startup environment. So my question to you is, how do you actually go up to someone and say, you know, there is a very tangible need for an interactive designer, an interactive or UX producer, as opposed to a very visual, you know, cut and paste designer?
So I think the first thing you need to do is try to educate what interaction designer does. So once others see the value, it's inevitable that this person will be hired. And the only obstacle to not hiring someone is that nobody, or at least people with the hiring power, don't see the value in hiring someone like that. So educating is a great start. Why do we need this? Like, if there are problems that cannot be solved, if always it's really hard in your company to solve problems, if there's a lot of back and forth, if there's, you know, a lot of like personal stuff going on, and nobody knows really where to tackle the issue from, I think it's a good that would be a good opportunity to suggest that interaction designer would bring order to this chaos, would bring structure, and we would be able to think more clearly. So it will bring the best out of us. So yeah, I would say start with education. It's something I was trying to do during my Paktor days, because I wanted to build a team, and I think it was quite hard to discuss about this because the founders don't really have a design background. So it took a while to relay the value that would bring to the company, and actually trying to find a way to translate that value into something like business people would understand, like some numbers would be ideal. But if you can't, just as close as you can to, you know, for them to understand you.
Yeah, so you've been like freelancing for a couple of like years and months and everything, taking on a lot of projects and so on. What do you think are the future trends of like, you know, UI and UX?
Future trends, as in the roles of UI and UX. Right. So yeah, this is something that I've been I've been thinking about for a while. Like, are we going into more specialized roles? Like, you know, design, it used to be like a digital designer, and then it's 2 things, and then it's 4 things, and then it's like it gets more and more specialized. But then again, with time, we get more generalists, like a product manager. It's a new role. It's a generalist. You don't have product management, I don't know, school, right? So it's hard for me to say, because this is something I'm actively thinking about. Like, are we going towards this more specialized direction or more general direction? I think going into more specialized is like a direct reflection of how the market is changing. As the markets are gaining, you know, more, as markets are becoming more competitive, every market is becoming more competitive. I think that's pretty much a fact. Companies try to find every little thing to differentiate, and that's why they need specialists to help them achieve that. I don't think UX design would be a thing today if the markets weren't ready to use that as a competitive advantage. Like, if you have 2 companies on the market, and basically you can get away with just having a slightly better product, but if there are 10,000 companies on the market, then you need a role for someone to think of this little button here, you know. So I think that's why specialization happens. But then on the other hand, you need someone to bring all these people together, to synchronize the thoughts of many people who are specialized. So that's why we see the rise of generalists as well. So I don't have an answer, but I think both are happening, and it's really interesting. We live in an awesome time, so we'll see. Sorry. Yep.
How do you break the communication barrier between the design team and the developers team?
Between design team and developers, this is interesting. So, okay, one of the most obvious things we've tried in companies that I worked in is to literally sit together, just sit together and talk. And actually that has helped a lot. Because whatever, fancy meetings you have with icebreakers and I don't know what, they won't work unless people do it every day. And you need that little communication every day. So you need to value having small, kind of meaningless communication often over having very meaningful but very rare communication. So sitting together is one way to kind of start that. And when people sit together, they would naturally be more inclined to talk about, to update each other, to talk about the problems, to try to solve something together, to seek advice. And that increases the communication frequency and gives better results. So yeah, that's one thing. I mean, I'm sure there are many others, but I can't think of anything concrete right now. If anyone has a better answer, yeah, feel free to answer. How to improve communication between developer and designer?
Would having a understanding of the language, or let's say in the case of web, if I understand HTML, would it help as a designer, help me communicate with, let's say, a developer? Maybe understanding their language or understanding the programs that they use. Would that be helpful as a interaction designer in your experience?
Yeah. Okay, so you reminded me of something now. Not only understanding each other's work, but actually actively involving each other. So in Grab, we had developers attend design reviews. Well, not all the time. That would be like wasting way too much time. But some key design reviews, we would invite a developer. And for every project that we start working on, we would know who the developer is from the beginning of the project, and we would think like from the very first stage, how do we do this technically? What are our limitations? So that we don't create something really blue sky, which can't be done. So and we have to go back and create again. So really involving from the early stage, trying to understand each other is key. Yeah.
Hi.
Hi.
So you're now with Google, and I understand that you failed on your first try. So my question is, what advice can you give to those who still want to land their dream job but failed on their first try? So yeah, what advice?
Yeah, that's true. That's true. So yeah, when I published that I joined Google, I shared this story. I applied to work in Google as a product designer before I came to Singapore. And I was a visual designer at the time, so I kind of thought I would switch to a product designer in a day. Of course, it didn't happen, and yeah, I was rejected. So basically, my main takeaway from that experience was to keep trying, and one day when I feel more confident, I would go back and apply. And yeah, I kind of forgot about it in the meantime, working on stuff, and one day, out of nowhere, Google asked me to join, which was like weird because, wow, how did this happen? And for a product designer role. But then, I mean, I wasn't really, thinking, I wasn't even confident when I was interviewing that I'm there yet. Like, am I qualified now? Is there anything different compared to the first time when I applied? So the first time I was overconfident. The second time it was the other way around. But yeah, I don't know what would be my advice. You have 3 times to try to apply in Google. By the way, to interview in Google. So use them wisely. But yeah. I think it's hard actually to apply and land an interview. I had someone that I knew at the time, but then if you don't know someone, it's quite hard. And I think making projects that would differentiate you, publish them publicly on Dribble, on Behance, and Google constantly uses Behance and Dribble to find people as they found me. So yeah, just try your best, and if they notice you, it will definitely be because you published something that you're proud of.
Hey, yeah. It's a follow-up question to what you said about having to educate the main decision makers when it comes to hiring other visual or interaction designers. I'm a startup founder. I would love if I had the resources to get an interaction designer on board, but we're still bootstrapped. So what are some of the tools? And you mentioned, Sprint, the book, or I was wondering if you had other tools or maybe readings or frameworks that you would recommend so I can educate myself.
Yeah, sure. So if you need something that's even beyond design, I would suggest that you study on like how to use agile. I think that would help you not only practically like deliver faster and deliver better stuff, but it will help you with how to think about things, how to empower your team. So the I guess, yeah, the Agile Manifesto, what was it called? Scrum Manifesto. Was it Scrum Manifesto? Okay, never mind. You can Google it, but it's very short, very practical. And you can, I guess, there's a lot of understanding behind the processes that they use, but it's definitely worth digging deeper into it, because it's something that primes your team to think differently. So even if you don't have an interaction designer on your team, through applying agile methodology, you would in a way train people to think more like interaction designers. So it's a nice cheap way to get the interaction designer mindset without hiring a designer, and would definitely help you in the long run with speed, with quality. Virtual reality design.
Augmented and virtual reality.
Augmented and virtual. Yeah. Okay. Well, that's more on the 3D side of things. So, I mean, there is a huge overlap. Obviously, you would need to know 3D software in order to work in virtual reality. But I feel like there is a heavy overlap in the sense that UX is still there. It's still present. And you can't ignore that. A lot of the apps, the games, everything that's in VR, in augmented reality, they have a way for you to interact with them, and by definition that means an interaction designer somewhere at some point needs to be hired there. So I'm pretty sure that interaction designers will start thinking and are starting to think more about shifting that way. I'm not sure in terms of tech skills what you'll need to become a VR interaction designer. Maybe none. Maybe it all stays as a 2D sketch, and then someone executes that and you work closely together. But I think once critical mass of people understand the potential of VR, and once we actually get to see some pretty useful day-to-day apps, products in VR and augmented reality, we'll see a boom of designers switching that way and thinking about it more actively. So I think that the roles will stay in terms of their essence, their core. We'll definitely have interaction designers for VR. And there are a lot of new challenges. Like I was interested in VR, and I was trying to think of what would be a great interaction for a menu, something simple like that. Like you change one variable, it's 3D, and suddenly no rules apply. You have to rethink everything from scratch. So it's a huge challenge, but that means it's a huge opportunity as well.
So yeah, we'll see.
All right, and on that point, I think we're going to wrap up the meetup. Let's put our hands together once again to thank Nina Geometrieva for speaking at today's meetup. Yeah. Yeah, thank you everybody for popping by today as well. Yeah, I hope you guys found it valuable. Yeah, feel free to approach Nina or any one of the Tech in Asia staffs around if you have any questions about anything.